Thank you so much. And thank you all for having me. Hi to folks on Zoom. I am going to be giving a talk that I gave for the National Council for Black Studies at San Jose State University at their 48th annual conference in March. So this is a little bit of information that I shared in my defense, but there is some new stuff as well. So let's get started with my talk. I often give both a land acknowledgement and a labor acknowledgement, so that's where I want to begin. The city of Boulder, and in turn the University of Colorado Boulder, is on the ancestral homelands and unceded territory of Native and Indigenous peoples who have traversed, lived in, and stewarded lands in the Boulder Valley since time immemorial. Those Indigenous nations include the Dide, Hinono Ino, Tis Tas, Numenu, Kiowa Chirixi Chirix, Sosoni, Ochete Shaukowen, and Nuchu. Additionally, 48 contemporary tribal nations are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. You can learn more about Indigenous territories, languages, lands, and ways to support them at native-land.ca. Also, I encourage you to get to know and celebrate the stories of Native American people in your discipline, field, industry, and community. You can find Native American organizations to support financially. Personally, I'm giving a monthly donation to Natives in Tech. Finally, here at CU Boulder, we can engage with the Center for Native American and Indigenous Studies, CNAIS, events, certificate courses, and people. Next, I have prepared a labor acknowledgement. The United States has a history of enslavement as peoples from the African continent were forcefully taken from their homelands to the US to provide forced unpaid labor under atrocious conditions across generations. Centuries later, the ramifications of the Atlantic slave trade permeate our society. Today, not only are the descendants of enslaved people suffering discrimination, prejudice, systemic racism, and state-sanctioned violence, but modern slavery is thriving in industries across sectors and around the world. The number one sector is the tech industry. Due to products like laptops, computers, and mobile phones, many of us here, including me, own at least one of these products. There are people, including children in some cases, who mine materials for these products. There are also tech sweatshops like Facebook's content moderation workers in Kenya, who are the lowest paid in the company at $1.50 an hour. The low wage and hidden labor of content moderators, and now the invisible data labor for artificial intelligence large language model labeling, continue to plague the tech industry today. In addition to unpaid, low wage, and hidden labor, there's also unrecognized labor. Computers started off as women who did mathematical calculations in the 18th century. 2 centuries later, the so-called clerical work involved Black women like Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Dorothy Vaughan doing math, engineering, and computer science at NASA. Their efforts were hidden for decades until Margot Lee Shetterly's book Hidden Figures debuted in 2016. On top of the past wealth in the United States that unpaid enslaved labor afforded countless governments, businesses, universities, and families, fortunes are once again being made from Black and brown people, but this time on social media. Creators have their intellectual property appropriated and monetized, such as content, fashion, takes, dances, and more. But thankfully, that is not how our story ends. In spite of all this, marginalized and racialized people's resilience, survival, and thriving outweigh and outshine all that the world has thrown at us. As Maya Angelou, may she rest in power, so eloquently named, bringing the gifts that our ancestors gave, we are the dreams and hopes of the slave. We rise, we rise, we rise. This talk is a testament to the role of Black studies in my journey as I traverse the pursuit of taking technology to task and positioning myself to be part of the professionals offering solutions to the problems that technology not only exacerbates, but creates. Together, we're going to look back at my experiences to see how much my life and research have shifted and responded to the changing landscape of technology and culture. Each twist and turn prepared me for the challenges ahead, while my foundation in Black studies during and after my undergrad years grounded me. Just as Black feminism and womanism center the lived experiences of Black women as valid and valuable starting points for inquiry, reflection, examination, and perspective, and critical race theory champions counter storytelling to give marginalized people the opportunity to combat dominant narratives, This talk will use my story as a vehicle of testament to how Black studies can be a fulcrum to leverage critical reflection on technology and a counterstory against the challenges to Black studies and the desperate need for more of it in technological conversations. I hope my humble talk of personal and communal stories can be an example amongst the many during this time that we've been here in Info in terms of how we can play a role in bringing tech into the Black studies we do and getting more out of Black studies and what it has to offer to the tech we produce and consume. As we begin, I want to share my positionality as a researcher, which informs my epistemology and the knowledge that my research produces. To discuss my positionality, recognize a standpoint theory, a feminist epistemology that views knowledge as socially situated. I identify as a Black woman with a medium complexion, and I recognize my privilege as a cisgender person who does not live with a visible disability. I'm middle class due to my socioeconomic status and have been educated as a first-generation college student through 3 higher education degrees, not including my pending doctoral degree from 3 predominantly white institutions. I will also be the first Black person to receive a doctoral degree in my department here in information science at the University of Colorado Boulder. The first Black woman to receive a degree from this institution was Lucille Berkeley Buchanan in 1918. When she graduated, she was not allowed to walk and receive her degree in German. CU Boulder now has a building named in her honor. My scholarship is part of a continuum of academic inquiry from an entire community of pioneers. When I walk in May, I'll be doing so for her and all the Black students who will come after me in my department. All of these things and more inform my approach to research, but there is so much more than just who I am today that informs who, how, and why I research. On this slide, the first picture to the left shows me in the 7th grade, standing on a chair precariously, next to a chalkboard full of my efforts proving my first mathematical theorem for a homework assignment. You see, after falling in love with math in elementary school, I attended engineering and math camps in junior high and high school. It was during these camps that I first learned about what a PhD was. I decided in the same moment that I was told what it was that I wanted to get one. I gratefully was accepted to Stanford University and started my freshman year, nervous and excited. The picture on the right shows me sitting in my freshman dorm knitting with a poster behind me of Betty Boop. I had used mathematical equations, almost 50 of them, to draw that picture for a class assignment in high school. However, I was weeded out of an advanced math class my first semester of college, wherein I was one of 2 Black people and one of 3 women in a class of about 50. And I did not feel supported in my first and only computer science course during my second year. Combined with the inexperience of being a first-generation college student, these experiences resulted in abandoning a desire to major in math, engineering, or computer science as an undergrad. By the time I was a junior and needed to declare a major, I realized that the one I had the most credits in turned out to be African and African American studies. They just had really great classes. At that point, I had fully embraced my identity as a nerdy Black woman and found my Black community through classes, clubs, and social events. The picture on the left is me wearing a Black at Stanford shirt next to a horse for no reason at all. At that point, the 2011 St. Clair Drake Memorial Lecture, held to honor the first director of the program in African and African American Studies, that's where I got to meet Dr. Mae Jemison, who graduated from Stanford with a degree in chemical engineering and African and African American Studies before becoming the first Black woman in space years later. The picture on the right shows me in conversation with her in front of the poster for the talk. Meeting Dr. Jemison was another opportunity for me to see a path that would allow me to join my love for technology and my love for myself and my people. I'm pictured on the right of this slide on graduation day with my regalia, including a Ghanaian stole that reads Class of 2011. On the left is my senior thesis poster that includes my name, major, department, advisor, hometown of San Antonio, Texas, the title of my thesis, and an abstract. While I didn't use person-first language in my thesis, I was interested in the experiences of students like myself who dealt with their mental health while being Black at Stanford. I graduated from that university with a degree in African and African American Studies, a degree that found me, and I was ready to quest forth to see what the world had for me. After a year of service with AmeriCorps in New York City, I went to a Union Theological Seminary which is an independent and social justice-oriented institution. On the left, I'm posing with a cardboard cutout of theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and on the right, I'm standing in front of a banner for the seminary. Once I'd finished AmeriCorps, I wanted to figure out my next move, who I wanted to serve and how. I was told that seminary was a great place to discern things, and several things happened while I was there. I attended the Octavia E. Butler Celebration of Arts and Activism at Spelman College in 2014 and began thinking about Afrofuturism, which would later show up in my academic work. I also started helping people with their technology and learning to code myself. On the left is a picture of me posing in front of a banner for Lesbians Who Tech, the conference in New York City, where I attended as an ally. And on the right, I'm sitting in front of two computer monitors with a shirt on covered in black and white photos of women in STEM. I got to celebrate my roots in African and African American culture through liberation theologies like womanism and Black liberation theology and Mujerista theology and Dalit theology, all ways of centering the experiences of marginalized people in spiritual and religious frameworks. I'm pictured on the left with a shirt from the African and African American Studies Department and a painting behind me of a Black person in a cloak. And on the right, I'm posing with Dr. Cornell West, who was faculty at the time of the seminary. I was at Union from 2013 to 2017. During this time, both the movement for Black Lives and Gamergate, an online movement against women in gaming and technology, were happening. On the left, I'm wearing a hashtag Gamergate is hate shirt. And on the right, I'm wearing a hashtag Black Lives Matter shirt. I wasn't just having conversations with my peers during lunch or after class, though. I marched the streets of Manhattan several times as a student and found myself protesting in the afternoons and writing papers about theology in the evenings. On the left, I hold a sign that reads Black Minds Matter, hashtag studying while Black. And on the right, I'm attending a march after the death of Mike Brown with a sign that reads Ferguson is everywhere. I soon realized that I needed to reconcile the dissonance between my activism and my academics. So for my master's thesis, I outlined how hashtag activism could be strengthened using ethics and liberation theologies like womanism, a Black feminism that centers the spiritual lives of Black women as a valid starting point for theological and ethical applications. My concept was techno-womanism. Techno-womanism is a framework grounded in the womanist ethic and constructed of a synthesis of intersectionality, interdisciplinary Black critical theories, and context of the techno realm, a concept that embodies both technology and the surrounding relationships we have with and through technology. The framework uses these tools to analyze the past, present, and future condition of technology centered on the experience of marginalized people in general and Black people in particular, and appeal to technocracy to build for the margins and pursue excellence according to the standards of those most impacted by social justice issues caused in part or in whole by their technologies. Pictured here is an early AI-generated image based on the title of my thesis, Techno-Womanism, a moral imperative for social justice, faith, and the digital space. In late spring of 2017, I graduated with my Master of Divinity. Pictured here on the left is me with my diploma, on the top right is my graduating class, and on the bottom left is a picture of all the African and African American students in the class. On the bottom right is the Union logo. In the fall of 2019, I came to CU Boulder to study information science. As an information science researcher, I'm interested in how Black people appropriate, create, and imagine technology to survive and thrive. My dissertation research asks the question, how do Black women, femmes, and non-binary people imagine the future of technology? I've explored this work in several venues. Here I am pictured with my research assistant, Joanna Mindy, at the 2023 Black Compute Her conference in Virginia, where we piloted a speculative code design workshop that would go on to be used in my dissertation research. That spring, I also spoke at the Yale Social Media Governance Institute spring convening about my research on Black Twitter and the Negro Motors Green Book, which I will share more about shortly. I'm pictured here giving a talk entitled The Future of Social Media is Black. I'm so grateful to that research because it afforded me the opportunity to engage with the news media about the project, including on MSNBC's Zerlina show. While here at CU Boulder, I've been involved with the Center for African and African American Studies, or CAAAS, pronounced The Cause. In addition to encouragement and connections, I've been grateful to receive funding from the cause in the form of a dissertation award and as a 2023-2024 Cause Alice Cleora Reeves Endowed Dissertation Fellow. My research has also served me as I pursued internships. In the summer of 2022, I was a UX design intern at a design and development boutique firm in Seattle, Washington. In this role, I was able to help an ed tech company learn about professional development opportunities for faculty who were teaching in minority-serving institutions like HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic-serving institutions or HSIs, and tribal colleges and universities or TCUs for Native American students. Then last summer in 2023, I was a user experience research intern at Google, also remote, but I was able to work out of the Boulder campus. My research project was about AI and accessibility. In addition to putting together a bibliography of academic research that outlines how AI and machine learning is used in assistive technologies, I also got to interview people with disabilities about their experiences with assistive technologies, their perceptions of AI and machine learning, and how they would use AI and machine learning to innovate assistive technologies. After graduating this May, I will have the opportunity to apply these skills in industry as a user experience researcher at Google in the Bay Area. I've shared these experiences because they have together in large part shaped who I am as a scholar, the populations with whom I study technology. Now I want to share why I study what I do. This is the background and motivation of my research that focuses on Black women and technology. In 2014, a hashtag End Father's Day began to trend by accounts purporting to be Black women that spewed negative stereotypes about Black men and whose other posts portrayed equally negative stereotypes about Black women in particular and Black people in general. Of course, keen observations of their feed, who they did and did not follow, and the content of their posts led a group of Black women, including Shamika Hudson and Inasa Crockett, to call out these fake accounts using their own hashtag, Your Slip is Showing. The campaign was traced by Shamika to 4chan, where men's rights activists, pickup artists, and miscellaneous misogynists had hoped to capitalize on previously existing rifts in the online feminist movement related to race and class. This all happened before 2015's Gamergate and before the 2016 presidential election, which saw a rise of Russian trolls and bots attempting to sway an election. As Slate reported this example of Black women on the platform formerly known as Twitter who clocked, checked, and called out these racist trolls, they wondered why these Black women's experiences had not been heeded. Another Believe Black and Brown Women and We've Been Trying to Tell Y'all article comes from Rolling Stone last August 2023. From left, the picture has Timnit Gebru, Rumen Chowdhury, Safiya Noble, Sita Pena Gangadharan, and Joy Buolamwini, who have been sounding the alarm on tech and its disproportionate harms to marginalized communities for years. Some of these women's disciplines are rooted in STEM, while others are in the humanities, but regardless of where their scholarship originates from, they each demonstrate the need for interdisciplinary actions against the ails of technology and the hopes for solutions. Former co-lead of Google's ethical AI team, Timnit Gebru, has her bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering and a PhD in computer vision from Stanford University. However, in 2021, on a year before OpenAI dropped ChatGPT, her expertise when applied to large language models, the backbone of generative AI, and their possible negative impacts, including environmental and amplifying bias, resulted in her being ousted from the company. As it reads in the article, she now leads the Distributed AI Research Institute, which focuses on independent, community-driven research into technologies away from big tech's influence. For a class assignment while studying at MIT for her doctorate in media arts and sciences, Dr. Joy Buolamwini decided to use facial recognition software. However, it was not working well until she tried a white face mask left over from Halloween, when it then worked swimmingly. She went on to publish a paper with her mentor, Dr. Timnit Gebru, called Gender Shades, in which they tested commercial facial recognition softwares and found that they were overwhelmingly performing the poorest on darker-skinned women. That paper was challenged by those software companies, but she went on to found the Algorithmic Justice League, advised President Biden on the executive order on artificial intelligence released in October of 2023, and recently published her first book, Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. Dr. Safiya Imoja Noble studied sociology with a focus on African American and ethnic studies as an undergraduate before spending the next decade working in multicultural marketing, advertising, and public relations. For her PhD, she studied library and information science and focused the topic of her dissertation on Google. The spark for the subsequent book, Algorithms of Oppression: How Search Engines Reinforce Racism, occurred in 2009 when Andre Brock told her to search Black girls on Google. She again searched in 2011 for fun activities for her nieces, and both times the results were full of pornography. She argues in the book that access to information should be freely given and a public good, not part of a business model. And she went on to argue that the results from Google search were full of bias and prejudice, but the fixes were superficial. Her work continues to challenge how technology shapes and controls access to information and the information itself. Sita Pena Gangadaran is a London School of Economics professor who co-founded Our Data Bodies, a nonprofit that examines the impact of data collection on vulnerable populations. As the Rolling Stones article describes, we all know how annoying it is when you get stuck talking to some automated system when you're returning a pair of jeans or changing a plane ticket. You need a human's help. There's no menu option to get it. Now, imagine getting trapped in that same unhelpful loop when you're trying to get welfare benefits, seek housing, apply for a job, or secure a loan. She says, I've been really concerned about the inability of humans generally, but members of marginalized communities specifically, to lose the capacity to refuse or resist or decline the technologies that are handed to them. So with LLM and generative AI, we have a new, more complex, and more seemingly inevitable technology being thrusted in our faces. She goes on to say, agencies are going to turn to a tool that promises efficiencies and cost savings like AI, right? They're also sold as tools that will eliminate human bias or human error. These institutions, whether government or private institutions, they're going to rely on these tools more and more. What can end up happening is that certain populations become the guinea pigs of these technologies, or conversely, they become the cheap labor to power these technologies. Rumin Chowdhury, former director of Twitter's own ethics team, Meta, Machine Learning Ethics, Transparency, and Accountability, before Elon Musk dismantled it upon his taking ownership of the platform, has been advocating for transparency in tech for years as tech companies insist on keeping their codes close to their chest. Tech leaders claim that the AI systems that run their products and services are unknowable, akin to the human mind, but more novel and dense. But Chowdhury calls BS. These systems can be stress tested, audited, and analyzed for biases. The article goes on to assert that for large language models, once you look closer, it's obvious they're not some machine version of the human brain. They're a sophisticated application of predictive text. Spicy autocorrect, Chowdhury and her colleagues call it. The experiences of these women are unfortunately not unique and follow a pattern identified by Caitlin Turner, Danielle Wood, Catherine D'Ignazio, which they call the Abuse and Misogynoir Playbook. It is a protocol used by people in power who attempt to stifle the voices of Black women. Misogynoir is a term coined by Dr. Moya Bailey in 2010 that describes the particular form of anti-Black sexism faced by Black women. The way that this playbook works is as follows. A Black woman makes a contribution. Dominant class and stakeholders respond with disbelief. There is continued disbelief through dismissal. There's gaslighting and even discrediting. There are attempts at erasure. And finally, there is revisionism, like new narratives, negative reactions to reminders of their contributions, and the loss of the original knowledge over generations, which leads to genuine unawareness over time of the original events. This likely sounds familiar if you're aware of the backlash against Black culture, history, literature, and intellectual contributions today. In a 2021 fireside chat at Spelman College, Dr. Safia Umojanobel said something that resonated with me and deeply impacted the trajectory of my research. She remarked, if you want to have the most just society, you should be asking a Black woman how the society should be organized. If we were given the time, money, resources, and runway that everybody else has been given, we would imagine the world differently. This is the start of what motivates my research, but there is more. I want to lay a foundation on some of the ways that our current world treats Black folks when it comes to technology, from how we envision it to who gets to shape it. They're just one of many examples on how it does us a disservice. Let's start with technology and the imagination. When it comes to science fiction that inspires innovation in technology, oftentimes literary contributions from Black people or even representations of us in speculative media are woefully missing. Here's an example from the Samsung Galaxy Watch that debuted almost a decade ago. Let's see.
With this miniature transmitter, oops, all right. This 86 reporting under control. How's it going? I have an emergency situation.
Relay the information to headquarters.
Should be your library records.
Jason, can you read me?
I read you. It's a secret agent rock slash. Well, now let's make a little spectacle of ourselves. Anything particular in mind? There's only one man who can get us out of here in time. I'll be down right away. I'm on my way. We're on our way. I'm on my way.
On my way.
As fun as that was, I wonder, where are the Black women with their go-go gadgets? Are we not in the future? Science fiction can be whatever we want it to be. So why not embrace some that features Black women and more people of color? The canon of science fiction that influences technological design can stand to be more diverse and inclusive, especially in regard to contributions from Black women, as I argue with Doctors Christina Harrington and Yolanda Rankin in the paper entitled All That You Touch, You Change, expanding the canon of speculative design towards Black futuring. There's actually a rich tapestry of Black women crafting narratives or representing characters in science and speculative fiction. Some storytellers in this space are Octavia Butler, Nalo Hopkinson, Nnedi Okorafor, Tananarive Due, Nisi Shaw, N.K. Jemisin, and Andrea Hairston, to name just a few. The Black women embodying science fiction characters on the small screen abound. There is Hel from the series Cleopatra 2525, Nebula Wade from Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, Zoe Washburn from Firefly, Martha Jones from Doctor Who, and Hippolyta Friedman, aka Oridlia Blue from Lovecraft Country. The long-running Star Trek series features several Black women from the original in the 1960s to the latest series Discovery, such as Uhura, Guinan, Lieutenant Palmer, and Michael Burnham. Then there's the big screen. In the MCU alone, there are at least 3 prominent Black and brown women of note to choose from: Shuri of Black Panther, Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy, and Valkyrie from Thor. These instances of Black and brown women in the future, in space, and using and excelling with technology are the change that we want and need to see, especially since our reality isn't teeming with such robust representation. Just as they're often absent from the fodder used for technological innovation, the people designing and developing the technologies of tomorrow today are more often than not Black women. The statistics for diversity in the tech industry and STEM fields are quite dismal. The National Center for Women in Information Technology analyzed demographics by occupation from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and reported that in 2014, while 26% of computing occupations were held by women, only 3% were Black. Anita B., the nonprofit dedicated to helping women and non-binary technologists succeed, also shared an alarming statistic that shows the problem is getting worse over time. In 2021, top companies collected and analyzed data on more than 500,000 US technologists from 56 companies. From this data, of the 26.7% women working as technologists, only 1.7% of them were Black women. And the Black women who are in the tech industry are often not recognized for their scholarship and contributions, but instead actively challenged, such as the previously mentioned gender shades researchers, Drs. Joy Buolamwini and Timnit Gebru. They showed that facial recognition software was more accurate on male and lighter skinned faces as opposed to female and darker skinned faces. Their intersectional analysis demonstrated that the performance on darker skinned women was amongst the worst. Their work on gender and racial bias in facial recognition software was disputed by the facial recognition companies who were called out, like Amazon. And as I discussed before, in cases like Gebru's, her research calling out the ethical issues with large language models resulted in her being ousted from the company at the end of 2020. Let's take a few examples from their research. When it comes to recognizing Black women technologically, machine learning algorithms used in facial recognition software are least successful when recognizing a Black woman's face. In Dr. Joy Buolamwini's spoken word piece, AI, Ain't I a Woman, she points out the discrepancies with a few prominent faces. Here on the left, Amazon is 92.9% confident that this image of data journalist Ida B. Wells appears to be male. On the right, Microsoft's facial recognition software is given a different photo of Ida B. Wells and calculates the image to be of a young boy wearing a hat and smiling at the camera with 70% confidence. First Black Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm appears to be male to Amazon's facial recognition software at 86.2% confidence. Here is a picture of famous talk show host Oprah Winfrey. Watson is just over 50% sure that she is the first lady. Oprah Winfrey has not nor likely will ever be the first lady, but Michelle Obama was. This output from Microsoft's facial recognition software with a young Michelle Obama on the left wearing a yellow shirt reads 79% confident as a young man wearing a black shirt, while also being 93% confident that there is a hairpiece in the image. Showing some agreement about a very wrong take of the image is the same image in Watson software on the right, being rendered as a toupee or hairpiece at 66% confidence. Believe it or not, I could go on. But beyond just mislabeling images of famous Black women, these inaccurate systems are causing real-world consequences for people who are misidentified. In August of 2023, a Black mother who was at the time 8 months pregnant was arrested by Detroit police for carjacking. Only the facial recognition software that led the police to her got it wrong. She sat in jail, having contractions, and when she was finally released, she had to be rushed to the emergency room. She is now suing the city and the Detroit Police Department detective, according to CNN. Computer vision, the umbrella discipline under which lies facial recognition software, is notoriously bad with darker skin tones. I personally experienced this when using Zoom during the early days of the pandemic in 2020. My brown skin was not registered as human and I was deemed background. This is an actual picture of that happening. This phenomenon is not new. But where did this field of technology go wrong? How about we take a look back to the mid-20th century at Kodak film? Let's talk about how technology sees us and the precursor to computer vision photography technology. Shirley cards, named after Shirley Page, a woman working for Kodak who was the first woman who posed for them, were used from the 1940s to 1990s to aid in color correction when developing film and to calibrate and standardize photo printers that used Kodak film in places like 1-hour photo shops. Notice the choice to label these images as normal. So what does that make the rest of us? During these decades, people with darker skin tones or people with different skin tones in the same photograph experienced poorer quality pictures because the science and chemistry of developing film favored pictures of people with lighter skin tones. Kodak did respond to complaints. However, those complaints were not from the darker skinned people whose photos were overexposed and who did certainly complain. It was the complaints of chocolate and furniture companies in the 1990s that spurred Kodak to make its photo technology better. The issue was that the customers of the chocolate and furniture companies could not differentiate between the different wood grains or between milk and dark chocolates. Only after receiving these complaints did Kodak take the issue seriously and do something about it. However, it wasn't until the mid-1990s that the normal standard for film expanded to a wider variety of skin tones. As photo technology made its way to computers, however, the issues remained. Let's flash forward to 2010 with HP's Media Smart Computer.
We're using the face tracking software, so it's supposed to follow me as I move. I'm Black. I think my Blackness is interfering with the computer's ability to follow me. As you can see, I do this, no following. Not really follow me. I back up, I get really, really close to try to let the camera recognize me, not happening. Now, my white cord, the Wanda, is about to slide in the frame. You will immediately see what I'm talking about. Wanda, if you would, please.
Sure.
Now, as you can see, the camera is panning to show Wanda's face. It's following her around. But as soon as my Blackness enters the frame, which I will sneak into the frame. I'm sneaking in, I'm in there.
That's it.
And there we go, it stopped.
HP's response? HP has been informed of a potential issue with the facial tracking software included on some of its systems, which appears to occur when insufficient foreground lighting is available. An HP spokesman said in an email, "We take this seriously and are looking into it with our partners." So this was a mistake, and the responsibility was on the user whose lighting was not bright enough for the technology to work, and not the company who built the technology, which does in fact work, but only for lighter skinned people. Today, shows like HBO's Insecure are lighting the way toward better photography for all shades and skin tones by intentionally using techniques that more properly reflect light on darker skin tones. But the entertainment industry is not the only place where photo technology is being used. Computer vision is fueling self-driving cars, and the skin tone issue is even more dire there. The computer vision that autonomous vehicles use is less accurate for people with darker skin tones, meaning that self-driving cars may be more likely to hit a pedestrian with darker skin more often than people with lighter skin. These examples are just from photo technology and computer vision. There are so many more from various applications of generative AI and large language models. As authors Mozilla Festival, Dr. J. Nias, Princess Samson, and Raziel Ogburu Ogbanaya posit in their black paper, artificial intelligence designed without trustworthy approaches can advance matrices of domination, a concept named after Black feminist Patricia Hill Collins to describe the interlocking systems of oppression that exist in society against Black women and marginalized people. Sociologist Ruha Benjamin points out that Silicon Valley positions technology as humanity's savior, and Hollywood tends to present technology as our destroyer. But either way, our agency is removed from the equation of this dichotomy. My research aspires to give Black women and marginalized communities the opportunity to embrace their agency when it comes to what technology may look like in the future. Allow me to share briefly how I approach Afrofuturism in my research. Design is traditionally done by a small, professionalized, and elite group of people who have the privilege of being able to design. This approach to design often leaves marginalized people out of the process, even though they're often the ones disproportionately and most negatively impacted by the products and services being designed. Methods such as participatory design and co-design can each empower people who are not designers or researchers to drive design from their own experiences as lived experts. This requires designers and researchers to intentionally challenge power dynamics and utilize techniques that consider the context of the communities they are engaging. Speculative design is an excellent complement to these approaches. It's described as provoking discussions around what the future might look like, raising questions about the consequences of technology, and helping to reimagine how technology might be used. An excellent framework for this is Afrofuturism. This film, Black Panther, is a great example of Afrofuturism, and those who watch this film are left with a clear example of the following notion. Imagination gives us agency. If we can dream it, we can change it. The combination of imagination and Blackness create a springboard for future unlike any other. In the interest of time, I'm going to move to the end of my presentation. Recall how computer vision could not differentiate Black women's hair from hair pieces. Let's take that aside about Black hair and technology to demonstrate where things were before, during, and after critical pushback from scholarship rooted in Black studies and its fellow disciplines. For a recent totally random talk in the IRL lab, I was given 1 minute to talk about anything I wanted that had nothing to do with my research. So I picked Black women's hair. I would have done my PhD on the relationship that other people have with Black women's hair, but I decided to go down a different path, clearly. For this totally random talk, I wanted to talk about this 18th century law from Louisiana about Black women's hair. But then I saw connections to technology today and I had to connect the dots. Let me share briefly what this law entailed. Part of the Code Noir, Black codes, the Tingnon Law of 1786 forced Black women to wear a Tingnon headscarf as a way to diminish free Black women by tying them to the status of enslaved women. However, Black women made the headscarf stylish, and when Empress Josefina of France adapted it in the early 19th century, it became haute couture. In 2016, an MBA student named Rosalia Googled quote-unquote professional hairstyles and unprofessional hairstyles to discover, unsurprisingly, yet disappointing results. On the left, you see the search results for unprofessional hair for work, full mainly of images of Black women in beautiful natural hairstyles, along with a few white women in wigs. On the right are results for professional hair for work that features white women with mostly straight hair and one picture of Beyonce, also with straight hair. Even the overall skin tones from left to right read differently, as the unprofessional hair for work results features more medium to dark skin tones than the professional hair for work images of white and light skinned women. Black women's hair is 2.5 times more likely to be perceived as unprofessional. And we're talking about the hair that grows out of our heads and the styles that have been part of our heritage for centuries. 2/3 of Black women change their hair for a job interview. And among them, 41% change their hair from curly to straight. In response to this hair harassment in educational and professional settings, the Crown Act was born. In 2019 in California, the act was first introduced by Senator Holly J. And from the Crown Act website, the Crown Act, which stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, is a law that prohibits race-based hair discrimination, which is the denial of employment and educational opportunities because of hair texture or protective hairstyles, including braids, locks, twists, or Bantu knots. Now, here's the good news, coming back to Google. Searching Google for professional hairstyle today, you can now actually search by hair texture. Clearly, someone at Google was listening, but it took us calling them out on it. It takes folks on the inside working for these companies, and it takes folks on the outside experiencing the tech firsthand. The good thing is we can see change happening, and that is what can happen as we continuously share our scholarship with the world from our disciplines and through interdisciplinarity. Pictured here is Dr. Patricia Bath, an ophthalmologist who was the first Black female doctor to receive a medical patent and was inducted in the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2022, 3 years after she passed. She's pictured here with a refractor or phoropter. If you have glasses, then you've likely seen this device. It's generally used by eye care professionals during an eye exam and uses different lenses to measure errors in sight and determine the right prescription for eyeglasses. Similar to the phoropter, Black Studies contains a collection of lenses or perspectives by which errors and deviations in society are measured, and prescriptions are crafted with the intention to address the issues. One lens, Afrofuturism, in combination with all the various lenses we're trained in and passionate about, can demonstrate a myriad of errors and prescriptions in the realms of big tech, artificial intelligence, and the culture wars. So hopefully you each recognize that you have access to a few more lenses with which to assess, analyze, diagnose, and treat technological ails. We as technologists have the skills and perspectives to critique technology sharply and cogently. And while there's so much to critique, there are multiverses of possibilities and hopes for technology that are actually rooted in our hopes and joys that can yield innovations that lift us up as people, community, and society. In her unpublished third book in the Parables series, Parable of the Trickster, Octavia Butler is quoted as saying, "There is nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns. With new suns come new worlds and the vastness of possibility." My work and trajectory started from African and African American studies and combined ethics and information science, leading me to narrow my attention to technology and its future. So much of what scholars in Black studies offer today occurs under new suns, new ways of thinking, new combinations of topics of conversation, new insights, and new collaborations. And it is under these new suns that we will find more light to guide us in these dark times. And with that, I conclude for questions and conversation. Thank you.